Okay, so this is part 2 of the use of performance enhancing drugs in sport. First thing we're going to do is look at some examples of where high profile drug offences have been committed by elite performers. So there you can see a number of athletes, and this is just a small selection of athletes that have been caught cheating. There's obviously many more that you can kind of go away and research yourselves, but these are some of the more kind of high profile examples. So we're going to start with Lance Armstrong, which I'm sure a lot of you will have heard of, and he was the top dog in the cycling world. He was somebody who won 7 consecutive Tour de France championships, which is unbelievable. It's never been done before. So he completely dominated that sport for a good number of years. Now, it was found out that he actually been taking part in blood doping. So blood doping is basically where an athlete is injected with either their own blood or somebody else's blood who has the same blood type as them. So in terms of being injected with your own blood, what will happen is they will have some of their blood taken out of the body, and what the body then does is replenishes the stores. So you're not left, it kind of replaces the store, so it goes back up to a normal level. They're not left with a lower level of blood when that blood is taken out. So once those stores have been replenished, they will then re-inject the blood that was taken out previously back into the body, or like I say, in some instances, inject other people's blood. Now, obviously this comes with its own medical risks in terms of the pressure on the kind of heart and the blood vessels in the body having that greater volume of blood. There's also a risk of contracting things when you through the actual injection, so there might be some contamination that takes place. But in terms of a sporting context, it's banned. It's not something that's allowed to take place. And the reason being is what blood doping does is provides a performer with an increased number of red blood cells. Now, red blood cells, if you don't know, carry oxygen within the blood. So basically, there is more oxygen that can be taken around the body in the blood to the working muscles. Now, that's an advantage because oxygen is needed by the muscles in order to produce energy. If it doesn't have that oxygen, it can't produce the energy. It's going to fatigue, you're going to get lactic acid, it's going to cramp up, it's going to stop you from performing. However, if you can keep getting that oxygen to the muscles, it will keep producing energy, it will keep performing, it won't get tired, and so your level of performance won't drop off. It will stay at a really, really high level. And in a sport, particularly like cycling, where you need that level of endurance, your level of performance is going to be higher than those you're competing against. So he was getting a massive advantage through blood doping, which eventually he was caught out as doing, and then given a lifetime ban from not just cycling but any sport, professional sport that kind of follows the kind of advice that's put in place in terms of drug cheating. So the second and third examples we've got are Ben Johnson and Dwayne Chambers, and both of these are sprinters. Ben Johnson representing Canada and Dwayne Chambers representing Team GB. And these both athletes were found guilty of taking anabolic steroids. And what anabolic steroids do, is replicate the hormone testosterone, which means basically when they're training, it's going to result in them getting bigger muscle mass. Now, in an event like sprinting, where you need power to kind of, and speed in order to be successful, when you perform for less than 10 seconds, flat out, it's going to be a massive advantage over your opponents if you can be bigger and stronger in order to produce that power and speed that is necessary. Now, Ben Johnson was probably the more high profile out of the two in that he won the 1988 100 metre sprint at the Olympics with a new world record. And then following the drugs test that he had to do after the event, it was then found out he was a drugs cheat and was banned for 2 years. Upon coming back to the sport, however, he then was found guilty of cheating again through taking drugs, and was then given a lifetime ban from the sport. Dwayne Chambers was given a 2-year ban. He's since served that ban and come back into sport and kind of competed again without being found guilty of cheating once more. Then move on to David Miller. Might be somebody you've not heard of, and he was found guilty of taking EPO. Now, EPO is a substance called erythropoietin, and what that does is very similar to the kind of blood doping in that it increases the number of red blood cells that is produced in the body. So again, like Lance Armstrong as a cyclist, he is looking for that, that increased amount of oxygen in the blood so it can get to the muscles to keep him performing for the full duration of his endurance event. Now, cycling, they're cycling for a considerable period of time. It's not like they're only competing for 10-15 minutes. Something like the Tour de France where they're riding up and down mountains. It's they're riding for hours on end. So that ability to keep the muscles getting oxygen, keep them performing without getting tired, is going to be something that is going to be advantageous to him as a cyclist. He was then given a 2-year ban, and hasn't really kind of since returned to sport, hasn't really mounted to kind of any notable success since returning. Maria Sharapova, a very famous tennis player, who experienced a lot of success, particularly at Wimbledon, which she was really famous for winning. She actually was found guilty of taking something that's called easy for me to say, meldonium. And what this basically does is increases blood flow within the body, which means she can exercise more effectively, exercise for a higher intensity and for longer. And now this is something she said she was taking for medical condition, an existing medical condition that she had. So she wasn't, she was claiming that she wasn't taking it for an advantage, but the authorities disagreed and gave her a 15-month ban from tennis. Rio Ferdinand, now this was an unusual case in that he wasn't actually found guilty of taking any drugs. He was guilty of missing drugs tests. Now, we've looked at this previously, particularly around the whereabouts rule, where you have to notify the authorities where you're going to be for an hour slot every single day. So if they want to come and do a drugs test on you, they will know that window where they can come and meet you, do that drugs test and go away and kind of look at the results. However, he missed 3 tests. So there are 3 occasions where the authorities tried to test him and were unable to kind of get hold of him, and as a result he was given an 8-month ban from football. And the last one we'll look at is Tyson Fury. So he was guilty of taking nandrolone, which is very similar to a kind of the effects that steroids have in terms of building that muscle tissue within the body, making it bigger and stronger, which obviously is an advantage as a boxer. He, for those who don't know, had an episode where he came out of the sport, was suffering with some mental health issues, with depression, he put a lot of weight on, and he did have a period of time where he didn't take part in the sport whatsoever. And when he was found guilty of taking nandrolone, he was actually given a 2-year ban that was backdated to the time where he wasn't actually competing. So he had other issues that were stopping him from taking part in boxing, but during that time it was deemed he was served his 2-year ban for taking drugs, and as you well know, he's back boxing now as world champion, with a potential fight against AJ hopefully sometime in the future. So there are some examples then of athletes who have taken drugs and been found guilty of taking drugs. As we've discussed previously, there's many examples of people who have taken drugs, kind of found guilty, or maybe taking drugs at the minute and just haven't been found to be cheating. Because we said that whilst all these new substances are becoming available for athletes to take, it then requires the ability to kind of test for the presence of these drugs in the blood. But what we're going to look at now is the impact that drug taking has on the reputation of a sport. So it's not just the kind of individuals it affects, but also drug taking affects the sport itself. Now, some of the impacts we've got here. So the first one is obviously the reputation of the sport may be tarnished. So when we look at the 100-metre sprinters now, these athletes, particularly with the males, they're considerably bigger and stronger than the normal bloke you might see on the street. if we have a number of instances where sprinters such as Ben Johnson, Dwayne Chambers, Justin Gatlin, who's been found guilty, another sprinter, if we're getting this kind of repeated pattern of people taking drugs, being found guilty, people aren't going to take the 100 metres quite as seriously. Everyone's going to think, well, actually, he only gained that particular time or only won that race because he's probably taking drugs to make him bigger and stronger. So no one's going to look at the 100 metres as being quite the event it should be. There's going to be a question over whether the sport is clean and fair. So is it that everyone who's taking part in that sport, are they completely clean of drugs, or are they taking drugs in order to give them an advantage? As a result, there'll be a mistrust of the results. So if Dwayne Chambers was then come back and smash a new world record as a 100 metre sprinter, would you actually think, oh brilliant, he's worked really, really hard for that? Or would there be a question, actually, has he broke that record because he's taken something? So he's had a previous history of taking drugs. Has he taken something now to give him that advantage, and as a result get that world record? And lastly, it then makes you kind of sceptical about all the performers, and the credibility of the sport. So you might look at let's say a rugby team who are all considerably bigger and stronger than perhaps another team, and they could be questioning, actually, are those is that team or those performers taking a drug that's going to make them look like that, rather than being down to their kind of own hard work and kind of graft that they're doing in training and in the gym, kind of getting that big and strong. So as you can see, it has a massive negative impact on the reputation of sport, so much so that people will actually question whether what they're seeing is actually honest and fair and true, and instead it's just a result of people meant to take drugs and get away with taking them without being caught. The last thing we're going to look at then is ethical issues around taking drugs in sport. And ethics, basically the moral principles that govern a person's behaviour. So these basically what is right and what is wrong. As an individual, we tend to want to do what is right by not just ourselves but right by others, and we kind of that idea of playing fair. So we're not going to try and cheat and get an unfair advantage over people. However, taking performance enhancing drugs is obviously deemed to be immoral and unethical. So it's not something that we think is morally right. Taking drugs, we know is cheating. You're getting an unfair advantage over somebody who is being honest and clean and fair, who's putting all the hours into train really, really hard, and then they'll be getting beat by somebody who's getting an unfair advantage through a substance that they've taken. So some of the questions that could be asked as a result of a kind of drug taking is, first of all, is should doping be classed as cheating? So if we think about Lance Armstrong as an example, who was doing blood doping, should that be classed as cheating, where he's put his own kind of welfare, his own kind of medical well-being at risk by taking on board extra blood? Is that actually cheating, or is that a risk that he's just taken that he should be allowed to take? Should there be a distinction between the use of performance enhancing drugs and recreational drugs? So we looked at Tyson Fury before, who was guilty of taking Nandrolone. He's also been found guilty of taking cocaine. So should there be a distinction where he's taking cocaine that is a stimulant and could potentially give him an advantage in the sport, make him more alert, more responsive? So should there be a clear kind of, well, actually this is something that's taken to enhance performance, and this is something that's just taken recreationally on a night out or with my friends that's going to make me feel better and have no impact on my kind of sporting performance? Another question should be, should we allow people who have been found guilty of taking drugs, should be allowed to take part in that sport again? So we looked at the kind of, again, Tyson Fury, there was Dwayne Chambers, Maria Sharapova, all people who've been found guilty of taking a performance enhancing drug. Should they be allowed to to have a second chance at competing again? You know, are we going to question whether what they're doing again is honest and true, or is there potential for them to kind of get involved with cheating again, which actually happened with Ben Johnson, resulted in his lifetime ban? And is it fair that the banned drugs list does not contain all drugs? So we said, or we'll give an example of Maria Sharapova, who's saying basically the drugs she took, she was taking for medical reasons, even though it was on the banned drugs list. So should it be that, well, actually, there'll be individuals who be taking drugs for medical reasons that then could potentially give them an advantage in their particular sport? Is it fair that maybe one performer can do that, but then maybe another performer like Maria Sharapova can't? So should it be that just all drugs are just let's say banned full stop? If you need a drug for whatever reason, it's tough luck. You've just got to take the kind of disadvantage it gives you. So that could be another question that's asked. So there's loads of kind of ethical issues that have been discussed and kind of raised as a result of drugs cheating taking place. So that's everything you need to know then for this second part of the kind of issue around performance enhancing drugs. Can you make sure please that you fill your sheet in, it's completed with the level of notes that you require, and have that ready for your next lesson please. If you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch with me by email or contact me on Teams.